Thank you so much for having me. I feel really honoured to be on the lineup today and to be following two amazing speakers in the session today. So today I'm going to be talking to you about psychology principles to power your digital team's success. So a few things about me before we get going. So as mentioned, I'm the digital PR manager at Brighton-based marketing agency Propellernet, hence the lovely Brighton sunset picture on my title slide. I have over 5 years experience in all things digital PR. I've worked in agencies in my whole career to date. I love reading, running, karaoke, which my poor colleagues are now well accustomed to. And I actually got my degree in psychology, and I've had this sort of lifelong love of all things psychology, how our brains work, how we interact with each other, and how every single experience that we have in our life is likely to affect us later on down the line. And this passion has always sort of served me really well in day-to-day life, in my career, but it came into particularly good use in 2020. So not to traumatize anyone, but I'm sure we all remember the year of 2020, the COVID pandemic. People were going through awful personal traumas, illness, redundancies. We were all locked in our homes. It was just a really, really awful time. And in the interest of oversharing, this was at a time when my own mental health was seriously starting to plummet as well. So I was suffering from burnout. I was really struggling to establish boundaries between my home and my work life. I was cooped up in a little flat in Bedford, not being able to leave, no garden. And I was missing the colleagues that I hadn't even met in real life yet. So it's a really tough time. And I didn't realize it at the time, but I wasn't alone in this experience. So the Indeed company burnout report showed that 67% of all workers felt that burnout had worsened during 2020, which isn't a big shock. When you look at the marketing and advertising industry specifically, the worldwide burnout rate goes up to 70%. And this is something that agencies, workplaces, employers are really aware of. So 57% of digital agencies reported preventing burnout as their top challenge when it comes to people and culture issues. So why are digital marketers at a higher risk of burnout then? Well, I have a few thoughts on why this may be. Firstly, as mentioned, many digital marketing roles require that sort of always-on creativity. So whether you're working in digital PR, social media, you're often required to be always tapped into the news, pop culture trends, so that you can jump on those opportunities and achieve success and results for your clients. Not only this, but most of us work in really quick-moving, competitive industries. So again, like as a digital PR, you're always trying to fight to be the first in a journalist's inbox with a great story. And there are a whole host of different reasons, including sort of agency work, normally giving higher workloads. Marketing and PR departments are often underfunded. And there's a whole host of reasons why us as an industry might be at risk of suffering at burnout in comparison to other jobs. And there's actually a whole host of research which suggests there's a whole host of other reasons why we might be at risk of suffering at burnout. And Gordon Parker, he is a leading psychiatrist in the field of burnout, and he suggests that those who identify as a perfectionist are at a really high risk of burning out in their career at some point. And I've had an inkling for a while that all digital marketers are perfectionists. So I've worked with a lot of digital marketers. I would say I am a digital marketer, and I do think that I'm a perfectionist. And if this is true, this does mean that we are at a higher risk of work-related mental health issues and for burnout as well. So the psychologist in me wanted to put this to the test. So I did a very tiny study of over 100 digital marketers, 55% of those working in digital PR, so thank you to any digital PRs in the room who took this study, around a quarter working in SEO and 10% in digital marketing. And I basically got these digital marketers to do the Big 5 personality test. So this tests people on a number of key traits from emotional stability, openness to experience, as mentioned in Rose's Fab Talk, extroversion versus introversion. But actually the trait that I really wanted to hone in on with this piece of tiny research was conscientiousness. And this is the trait which reflects the tendency to be really organized, really goal-directed, and hard-working. So basically willing to do anything to achieve goals, achieve success for the places that we're working at. And this is because psychological research has shown time and time again that if you score really highly in this personality trait, then you're way more likely to be a perfectionist and therefore at a higher risk of burnout. So what were the results? Well, as expected, digital marketers showed above average scores in conscientiousness, Almost 1 in 10 digital marketers scored 35 out of 40, so really, really scoring quite highly in this trait of being very goal-directed, very willing to go above and beyond to achieve their goals, basically. And 67% of the digital marketers that I surveyed said that they were a perfectionist. So again, really showing that correlation between conscientiousness and perfectionism. So, long story long, from this research, I would like to conclude that digital marketers are at a higher risk of burnout. And this can lead to a whole host of things, from employee mental health problems on an individual basis, a disengaged workforce, lower productivity. There's so many things, basically, it's not good news. And my original talk idea was to maybe come up with some suggestions, solutions into how we can be designing our teams and putting things into our workplaces so that we can support the mental health of our teams. But actually, I think a lot of people have already done this, and to be honest, they've probably done it in a better way than I could. However, I did want to include a slide on the different things that you can be considering to implement in your workplace if these are not implemented already. Things like mental health support, trained mental health first aiders, being able to take mental health days, even enforcing a culture of open communication around workloads and mental health and well-being can really, really help when it comes to managing the mental health of your teams. Instead, though, I wanted to share with you some sort of day-to-day, hopefully quite actionable tips, which are backed by psychological research, on how you can engage your workforces and yourself so that your teams could be happier, healthier, and more successful. So these whole sort of theories are based upon this book by psychologist Daniel Cable, and it's called Alive at Work, and I'd really, really recommend reading it if you haven't already. And this book basically explores the neuroscience of helping teams love what they do. And the whole book is centered around this concept that many organizations are deactivating a part of their employees' brains called the seeking system. And this is a very legit part of the brain. It's a neural network which runs between the prefrontal cortex, so at the front of your brain, and the ventral striatum. And it basically creates the impulse to explore our world, learn about environments, try and create meaning from the situations that we find ourselves in. So it's basically the part of the brain which controls our curiosity. And in 2023, I do think that digital marketers need to be more creative, more quick thinking, and more curious than ever before, which does require the need for a more activated seeking system. Luckily for us, there are 3 triggers which very easily and very quickly can activate the seeking system. These are self-expression, experimentation, and purpose. And when all 3 of these triggers are activated, we can have the results of increased curiosity, more enthusiasm, creativity, which is obviously going to make you more enthused about your work, happier at work, and less likely to suffer with burnout. So I'm going to be taking you through the 3 triggers and how you can sort of implement these in your day-to-day life on your digital team. So the first trigger then, self-expression. In the words of Madonna, express yourself, don't repress yourself. And this is based upon the concept that when our colleagues know who we are when we're at our best, the more likely we can feel like ourselves at work and express ourselves more authentically. So how do we get to know ourselves and our colleagues when they're at their best? Well, there's a few ways, one of them being to use personality tests. So there's loads of psychology-backed personality tests out there, from the Myers-Briggs, which shows you 16 different personalities, the DISC personality test, the Big Five. There's a whole host, basically, which you can choose from, and use it within your team to basically learn about how an individual is motivated, how they might cope in times of high pressure or stress. And you can basically use this with one-to-ones to basically create opportunities for people to do what they're best at as often as possible. So really asking your teams the question, like, what are you doing when you feel like you're at your best? Is it speaking on a stage? Probably not. Is it pitching out digital PR ideas? Is it talking to a client? Really identifying that sort of sweet spot and then enforcing that into their day-to-day lives at work. The second trigger that we can be activating is experimentation. So effective neuroscientists explain that one way to activate our seeking system is about creating an experimental safe zone. And this is because when people go into a performance situation, so whether that be a client share back, it might be a talk like today, this will trigger anxiety, and it would generally make people more risk averse and less willing to persist than those people who see this situation as a learning situation. So just like an open, fun thing that I can just learn loads about. And obviously that's quite a hard state to get in, But actually, if we can be creating environments of psychological safety within our teams, then we can help people to adopt that mindset and hopefully feel a little bit more confident and more successful at work. So there are a few things we can do to create these environments of psychological activity. So the first is no bad ideas. So ideas sessions, if you're a digital PR, for example, you will have a lot of idea sessions in any given week where you have to go in and come up with these amazing creative ideas for a client that are going to get loads of links and really drive success for clients. But actually, if you've got an environment where you feel like you can't speak up and share one of those weird and wonderful ideas, then it's not going to lead to a more creative or more successful team, because actually you don't have that environment where people feel they can express themselves. A really nice example I always think of is the Weetabix and Baked Beans collaboration, because I just think if you went into that brainstorm without an environment of psychological safety and said, why don't we just yeet a load of baked beans onto some Weetabix and just see what happens, I just don't think it would have happened. Whereas actually this social media activity went viral. It was regarded as a great piece of marketing by the Weetabix team, got over 125 likes on Twitter. And so actually fostering those environments where people feel like they are psychologically safe to come up with their most creative ideas is only going to benefit your teams. The next point on creating environments of psychological safety is encouraging experimentation. So digital marketing is all about trial and error, particularly, again, in digital PR. It's a lot about learning what works, what doesn't, flinging stories out there, seeing if they land, learning from what is going to happen if they don't. And a really nice example of where experimentation went right for us was we had a client called Scrap Car Comparison. So they help people to compare scrapyards so that they can get the best deal for scrapping their car. It was the first time working with this client, and they wanted something big. They wanted something juicy that was going to get their name out there. It was going to get loads of links. It was going to get loads of coverage. And someone came up with the weird and wonderful idea about how we could use old scrap cars. So could we let out our 2020 pandemic rage, our pandemic stress, all these negative emotions on these old scrap cars? And I have a video which shows the results of this idea, which hopefully works. Favorite bit of the video. And this campaign was a huge success. So it got over 300 pieces of coverage. It increased our clients' social media page likes by 400%. And this obviously is an example of where experimentation has gone right. But it was a huge experiment. We'd never done this campaign style of format before. We'd never done a campaign full stop with this client before, and we certainly had never used tanks to crush old scrap vehicles before. So it was a huge risk for a first campaign for a client, and it was a massive experiment where, luckily for us, this went right. But actually the point is you should be encouraging experimentation in your teams, and even if it doesn't go right, you should then be using that as a learning opportunity to figure out how you can do things better in the future. The third point on how to create environments of psychological safety is to make time for play. And this is quite a simple, small thing around basically designing time in your work week to have that time where you're being silly, you're playing without focusing on an output. What we do in the Propellernet PR team is have Thursday calls. We have topic calls where we debate all the random stuff in the world that nobody probably thinks about, from weird and wonderful quirks within the team to the most overrated things in the world. And what I really love about this is it really helps to foster that environment of psychological safety, because it helps people to just share their innermost weird and random thoughts. I know the first time I shared that I hated the Muppets, I was seriously fearing my job security. it didn't go down well. But actually having that time to be silly and to play without focusing on that creative output is only going to benefit your teams to sort of build that trust, build that communication, and yeah, have more creativity moving forward. The final way we can be activating our seeking system is through purpose. And this is because it's much more powerful, more comprehensive, and less expensive to motivate people intrinsically with purpose rather than extrinsically with things such as salaries or bonuses. And there's a really nice psychological study which goes to show this. So Grant et al., some psychologists back in 2007, they had a group of call center workers, and they were doing work to fundraise money which would go to scholarship students. They split the group into two, with one group having a session with a scholarship student who explained how the money raised was going to change her life. It was going to completely transform her career trajectories. It was going to mean so much to her. Amazing. The other group didn't have such a session, and they all went back to work. What they found was the group who'd had the session with the scholarship student and therefore understood the impact and the value of their work spent twice as long on the phones to potential donators, and they made on average £300 more a week. So really going to show what that understanding of the impact of your work can have in motivation and creativity. And we're told a lot in digital PR and in marketing as well. It's PR, not ER. As Rosa said, we're not saving lives. No one's going to die if we fuck up. It's fine. It's really not that deep. However, good marketing strategies can drive real growth for businesses of all sizes. And that is actually really meaningful. A little example of where we really found this within the team was some work we did with Evans Cycles. So we had a challenge where we wanted to position the client as a leading authority in the UK's electric bikes market. So we recreated Britain's favourite advert, Sir Ridley Scott's Hovis advert, depicting the original Hovis boy who is now getting on at age 62, finally conquering Shaftesbury's Gold Hill with the pedal assistance of an e-bike. Now, this campaign was super fun to work on, great, we all loved that, but it actually drove a 62% increase in online sales, 28% increase in offline sales, and the session where we were sharing back the results of this showed just how big the impact was on the business and the impact on the client team's life as well. And this still stands as one of the campaigns that really landed with the team because they really understood the impact and the value of the work that we're doing. And this is just one example. Every agency in the room here today is going to have millions of examples of work where they're really achieving that success for their clients. But the point is, we should be having those transparent sessions, sharebacks, catch-ups, whatever they are, to basically communicate the impact everyone's work is having, not only on your business, but if you're working with clients, on their business and on their work lives as well. So I wanted to do a talk and not include the cheesy takeaway joke, but I failed. So here are my key takeaways. Digital marketers are at risk of suffering from burnout more than ever before, and probably more than other people in other industries. But we can prevent this burnout by harnessing the seeking systems of our employees and activating 3 key triggers. So self-expression, experimentation, and purpose. And if we can do this, we can help our teams to become more fulfilled, more creative, and less likely to burn out. And that was it from me.